What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. Hopefully everyone's doing wonderful today. One Iron Reefer, what's going on? Lee, John, Martin, Aaron, Fish Freak Frail. Hopefully you guys are doing wonderful today. So today is going to be a bit of a random Q&A, and we'll dig into whatever questions you guys have in the chat. Learning to reef, what's going on, buddy? Martin, you're asking about copepods. So brand new tank, introduced some, just finished cycling 3 weeks ago, introduced copepods to my 60-25 water box. Yeah, and I said they were exploding all over the glass. That generally does happen in a new tank. It sounds like the goal is to have a mandarin in your tank later. And with that, again, you want lots of copepods. Honestly, one of the biggest things is to dose Phyto to your tank, because the Phyto will feed the copepods and will help their population expand. So that's definitely, I would just, pick some up and just give it a little glug every few days, and that will really help boost the copepod population. What's going on, Greg? What's going on, Josh Allen? My first tank. Nice. Welcome to the magical, wonderful world of reef tanks. Hi from Saskatchewan. Hello from BC. What's going on, Island Reef? I'm curious where you found this island in Saskatchewan, though. Feeling better this week. Yes, much better. That was a few days of not fun, but back to good again. Do I need to turn off UV while dosing Phyto? I wouldn't worry about it personally. The UV it breaks down more smaller cell organisms. You're from an island. Okay, fair. So, honestly, I wouldn't worry about turning off the UV. You'll be fine. The Phyto will still be in there. And you got to think, too, when you have UV on a tank, not everything is flowing through it all at once. Like for copepods, for instance, most of the time they're on the glass, the rocks, the surfaces. They're not necessarily flowing through the UV. Even when you dose, Phyto to your tank, yes, some of it will flow through there, but the majority of it doesn't. So it's always a good one. What's going on, Phil? Have you ever used sodium hydroxide for pH and elk? Why, yes, I have. I'm doing it right now. It is nasty stuff. So if you are going to use sodium hydroxide, it is very caustic. Use gloves, use safety glasses when you're doing it. It is nasty stuff. And if you dose it too high of a concentration, it can actually eat away at the fittings on your dosing pumps. So food for thought from experiments. So that just goes to show how caustic and nasty it is. It does magic for pH, but again, it's nasty stuff. I do have some dosing on my tank, as well as like 3 or 4 other methods. So I'm not fully doing it, but I am supplementing with it. The main benefit is it does help remove the CO2 from your water, which is a big thing. Do you have a favorite fish, Devin? I really like mandarins and I really like copper bands. I think they're both super cool fish. Those are probably, I'm going to say, the 2 that I like the most. There's tons of other ones out there, but those are good ones. John Wright. So you're setting up a CO2 scrubber 2 days ago, looking forward to testing tomorrow and seeing if my pH is different. So CO2 scrubbers do work wonders. I know you said you were not having on the recirculating method, just on the skimmer intake. Now with that, I find if you add moist air to it, it does make your media last a lot longer. And again, which is a good thing, right? Especially any consumable you're spending money on. So I found it most effective to recirculate it. That way the air is running through it again has already been scrubbed from CO2. So you're just getting the atmosphere air that absorbs into the water, not what the skimmer is sucking in. So the media doesn't have to work as hard. That combined with the moist air both make your media last a lot longer. So the recirculating method is definitely the way I would recommend for that. From Miratus Islands. I will have to look that up later. I don't know where that one is. But welcome. Do Easy Reefs Booster and Dose Ready for Phytoplankton. I have actually used that in the past, and that was a pretty cool system because you could just drip it or dose directly from the container, which was a really cool way to do it. Does sodium hydroxide clog pumps like kelp? I have not had either ever clog pumps on me, so I've not experienced that issue with either. So for me, no. But possible, but I've not had that issue personally. Martin, I won't be starting any corals for a while, but should be dosing a bit of kalkwasser to keep the fish and invertebrates happy. I would wait for the corals. You're not going to have a lot to supplement unless you need it for boosting pH or something else. But if you're dosing it, you are dosing your calcium in your elk. If nothing's absorbing it, then eventually it's going to build up too high. So I would hold off until you get some corals and then worry about it. Jay Barrett, thanks for the awesome podcast. You're welcome. Thanks for watching and hanging out. Any tips for back siphoning from the Red Sea doser? I don't know if it's specific check valve. Okay, so in theory, a doser should not be back feeding. If it is, that means the rollers are not pinching the tubes well enough. So if it's a new doser, I would just pull out the tubes and like reseat them on the rollers and make sure it's fully pinching it properly. If it's a used doser that you've had for a while or bought used, it's possible that tubing inside might need to be replaced. But usually if there's any siphoning, it's because it's not pinching it properly. So, pop off the cover and just take a look at the tubing and see if it needs to be replaced inside. And yeah, sometimes you can just reseat it and it's fine. But if it's not super pliable, if it's stiff or rigid, which happens over time, then you want to replace the tubing and the dosing heads. How do you lower calcium in a reef tank? After doing a water change every week, calcium is still 600. You are probably, Sandtown Aquatics, you are probably using a salt that has elevated levels of calcium in it, and that's likely why. So realistically, either let it drop naturally, or if you really want to get it down, find a salt that has a lower calcium level and then do your water change with that. That's kind of your only options on that front. I want to put it in a vast kelp stir in. Yeah, like I have the vast stir, and it's a nice kelp stir for sure. But again, I would wait till you had corals. Good afternoon, Dev. Welcome, Triggerfish45. Really appreciate you doing this. Thank you. You're most welcome. Thanks for hanging out. I have a big tank and a little tank. On the big tank, recirculating CO2 scrubber is key, 100%. Otherwise, the media only lasts a week or two. I agree. On the 25, the media lasts a while on the tiny skimmer. Yeah, so recirculating, definitely, I find, I'm going to venture to say it goes from lasting, a week or two to, 5 or 6 weeks in my experience. It definitely adds a lot of life to it. In the chat, we're also talking earlier about, what media you're using. The stuff I've used was called Carbo 2 Lime, and it was sold from like some vet site, but I bought a 5-gallon pail for like $140 or something, which was much cheaper than buying the little aquarium packs. So mileage may vary. Some work better than others. I know some of the diving ones, some of the other ones people have told me they last way longer, but again, it's up to $200 for a pail of it, so all depends what you want to do. Anyone want to calibrate my new pH probe? It's good to do that once in a while. I citric acid cleaned the probes on both my tanks recently, and I keep meaning to recalibrate all mine. It's on the to-do list. That makes more sense. We'll check it out. Awesome, Jay. Do you carbon dose? If so, can you tell us what you dose and what your schedule is? I don't currently carbon dose. I used to, and I have in the past. When I did it, I did use Nopox for a while, and I also tried using vodka for a while. When I did it, though, I had a weird thing on my yellow tang. He had a bit of orange blotchiness on him from the carbon dosing. I don't know why. I stopped carbon dosing, it went away. So I kind of never really carbon dosed after that, just because had some weird effect on my fish, which I wasn't really down for. But if I was to do it again, there's, depending what you're doing, I had Lou from Chopping Marin on a week or two ago. And, he has his different ones for targeting different stuff based on your nitrate phosphate ratio. I'd probably try those out if I was to do it again. Because it's kind of a cool system how you can pick, which product to target whatever your specific scenario is. So that's likely what I would do if I was to try it again. As for the frequency, again, I would put on a doser, and it would be, a slow drip throughout the day. Anything you're dosing to the tank, again, with carbon dosing, you always want to start lower. So, if it says start at 1 mil, start at half a mil. And again, I always like to start slower and then build your way up so it doesn't impact your tank as much. And same thing too, if you can do it manually, but if you have a doser, you can break up your dose to multiple mini doses throughout the day, which I always find better than having, just one time bigger dose. Island Reef. I recently had white string algae in my sump. Is that an algae bloom from Nopox? Yes. If you're having white stringiness from dosing, that's likely bacteria that you're actually seeing. It's kind of like a bacteria bloom or slimy, and I've also seen that before in carbon dosing. Any experience with the Coral Essential range? I just started using the Primary Care range along with Grow and Amino. I have used it. From my understanding, it's, some pretty solid stuff. I haven't used it long term to say, but what's been your most successful reef tank and why? Well, depends on what you consider successful. I had an acro spawn in my tank last week, which was pretty awesome. So that's pretty cool. So in terms of success, that's like Mother Nature level reefing. Like the tank isn't, perfectly happy, but it's obviously something's happy if it is spawning. So I thought that was really cool. So I've had rock flower spawn before, but that's the first time I've had an acro spawn. And it's cool to see the tank. Like I literally thought my wife, fed the fish or something, because it was just full of what looked like little pellet foods until I saw they're actually little coral gametes, which was really cool. So that was sweet. So that's like pretty solid. Again, for a successful tank, like for reefer level, I'm pretty stoked that happened. If you call like successful tanks, like my old 20-gallon Red Sea Nano, like tons of rock flowers, acros, everything, that was super easy tank, and that was cool. Any tips on getting rock flowers to spawn? It did seem somewhat seasonal, and it also did seem somewhat like moon schedule based. And I also felt like after I did a water change with a bit cooler water, I felt like that also helped spawn it. The other thing with rock flowers too, feeding them fairly heavy also plays into it as well to help them, be ready to spawn. Those are kind of the main things I'd say that affect it. My nutrients weren't bottom out, so I found it weird. Sorry, what was the pretext on that one there, Island Reef? Martin, Hydros or Neptune, what's your personal opinion? I am using Neptune now. I had Hydros, I did use it. I didn't have the best experience with the Wi-Fi power bars, and that kind of put me off a little bit. Lots of people use it and love it. I theorize it's related. So Hydros was basically saying, okay, it's my network, but I also have I work in IT, I have a business grade network in my house, so I don't think it's my network. However, I've talked to other people, like I use Ubiquiti stuff in my house, and I know other people that use that also had some weirdness with Hydros. So I think it's something related to that. So if I was to ever use it again, I would do the wire power bars, but I'm running Neptune on both my tanks right now. Nano's controllerless. I'm trying to keep it super basic. So far so good, but I have the, I guess, A3 Apex on the tank beside me, and then whatever the previous one, A2, whatever was before that on the other one. So I find it pretty flexible, and I've used it, so I've helped a bazillion people program their tanks. So I'm pretty proficient in it, so I tend to lean that way. An overall good experience. Dustin, I have two 75-gallon tanks, just bought a 200-gallon tank, solid. Can I put bio blocks in those two from the other two tanks and put the new water in the new tanks and it not cycle? You will still have a mini cycle, but you will greatly reduce it. So kind of what I did when I was doing tanks. Again, if you have rock and biome, all that stuff you can move in, it makes a massive difference on your tank being, more insta-tank. Same thing, if you fill up the new tank with water first, and then use that to do some water changes with your other tank. So you're basically equalizing the water from your different systems. And then if you move coral and rock and stuff into it, it won't really be as shocked because it's already used to that water. And I find that's a really good way to do it, especially if you're merging the tanks together. Greetings, what's going on, Michael? Welcome. Jay, in your experience, what was the biggest factor to coloration? So there's a few different things on this one. So coloration, part of it is light, having a decent par range for it. What you see from the corals, what is reflected back at you. So if you have a more fuller spectrum light, you're going to see more colors reflected back at you. The other part of it is going to be coral health. If a coral is not happy, its colors are going to be more dull. If your stuff's stable, you got good water parameters, the coral's happy, it tends to be a little more colorful, a little more vibrant. And I find if you go down the trace element rabbit hole, then again, you can pull a bit more color out of your coral, that little bit more of that, kind of shimmery pop. It's hard to explain, but you'll see it just looks a little more vibrant, a little more to it. I find when I was really good at dosing like trace elements daily and everything was like dialed in on that front, like stuff was just glowed, like it had that extra kind of magicalness to it. So it depends, but the biggest thing is keeping stuff stable in your tank, right? You want your coral to be happy. You don't want massive swings. Some swings are fine, but you don't want massive constant stuff. It needs to, adapt to your tank. It needs to settle in. It needs to be happy, and that all plays into it. Do you use their tester? I think you're referring to the Trident, and yes, I do have a Trident on both my tanks. I know a few people have asked me about this one too. I do have the Trident. I test half as much on it though, so that my reagent lasts twice as long. The caveat with that, I would say though, because everyone always asks me about this one, is at the very end, I feel like the calcium and magnesium sometimes are a little bit off for readings because you're, exposing it to atmosphere twice as long as you're supposed to. But in general, I don't find it to be that big of a deal. But yeah, so I got to try it on both systems. Is it really a game changer? Yes, I'm still using the Mastertronic as well. It does test other stuff, which I do. I quit using it to test elk. I still let it test calcium mag once a week, and I use that as a bit of a spot check just to know if the other testers kind of keep it honest and know if anything's off. But honestly, the majority I'm using it for is using the nitrate and phosphate, which I have it test twice a week. And then that's kind of my thing, just to know where the tank's at. Richard, what's going on, buddy? Brian, stuck between the expensive GHL and dosing pump or the Hydros and Comore? Okay. Supposedly GHL is coming out with newer firmware and stuff on it. I think GHL is one of the best for build quality, like physical build quality. What's going on, Emma? For their hardware. But the interface, I find it extremely outdated and not as intuitive, especially if you want to do more complex things. So I find it to be a very out-to-date, not as user-friendly operating system. But I think the hardware is really good. Hydros I don't think it's as well made as GHL, like it's cheaper made, but their interface is much easier. Again, if I was going to do Hydros, I would do it all wired. I wouldn't do the wireless ones, just because I found them to be not as reliable, but the wired stuff is supposed to be pretty solid. Comore pumps. All the Comore pumps I've used have been solid and reliable, so I've never had any issues. The Comore has been pretty good over the years. Woody's gamer tag. I dose 500 mils of calcium, 500 mils of elk, soda ash, daily to maintain 8.5 and 420. I don't have a lot of sand turning to rock and precipitate. Why is my dose? How much coral do you have in there, Woody? Because that is a lot. That's like time to get a calcium reactor level. Jacob, I'm about to get 1999 super chat. Thank you, Jacob Mills. Much appreciated. I'm about to get a clam, 4 to 5 inch range. I've never kept one. Do you spot feed? Any letting flow requirements? Anything else I should know? Thanks. Okay, so clams are massive calcium sucks. So your calcium consumption is probably going to go up. 4 to 5 inches is a good size because they're mainly photosynthetic at that point. The smaller they are, they're a little more heavier on the feeding. They filter your water, so they're actually great for water quality. They suck in as much as they can out of the water and through it. So any little particles you feed the tank are going to feed the clam as well. So if you do broadcast feeding your corals, or like I feed my tank mysis and all those little particles, like all that stuff's going to go through there. So that can definitely play into it. But yeah, clams tend to love lots of light. So flow wise, again, I've always had mine in a bit of lower flow, not ever crazy flow, and they've always been happy. Those are kind of the main tips on that one. Woody's gamertag Coraline is growing, but nothing else. Yeah, what's your magnesium there, Woody? 1450. Okay, that's a normal range. That still seems like a lot of calcium mag. I'm curious what... I don't know. You should send me a photo of your tank later. I want to get an idea of what coral load you have in there. Michael Blizzard. In the nano world... It's a given that water changes are key. In my opinion, an optimum salt like Red Sea Coral Pearl with high elk would be better to utilize a formulation more like Red Sea Blue. If you dose your tank... Okay, so when picking salt, I always say get one with the elk in the parameters that are closest to where you keep your tank. So if you do a big water change, it's not going to shock your system. Now this is if you dose anyways, and not even if you keep your tank. If you don't dose your tank and you only rely on water changes for your dosing, then having an elevated levels kind of carries you over until the next water change. But my preference is, dose a couple mils a day of whatever product you need, and then pick a salt that matches your level so you can do a big water change and not shock your system and everything's happier. That's Ryan Washington. Done. Thank you. You're welcome. Richard, what are you looking forward to this year for shows? Will I see you at? That is a very good question. Tentatively, maybe, possibly Rap Orlando and possibly Macna Orlando. I don't know, I like the Orlando shows. Possibly. No promises yet, but those are the two I was half debating. Coraline Algae. Blast the little clam with light. Yeah, exactly. See, Richard knows it. Clams love light. Dustin, unfortunately I can't use a lot of live rock because of a turf algae breakout. So what you can do too, if you could take your rock that's infected with turf algae, dose it with something, hydrogen peroxide, or add a pin cushion into your tank. And then, do that, and every week, kind of kill off the algae and pick a different rock so you don't completely kill your cycle. That is a thought. What I've found successful over the years is using hydrogen peroxide. Turn off your flow and just kind of like hover it over the algae and kind of spot treat it within the tank. And that works pretty well to kill it off too after a couple treatments. Is it possible to raise nitrates too fast? I think if you're shoveling in food, that could, raise it up quicker. I don't know if there's a too fast, but you just want to make sure it's balanced, right? So you're exporting, roughly what you're importing to keep it at a stable level, because your corals, your tank will be much happier. Thanks for all the great input and content. You are most welcome, Martin. Thanks for supporting and hanging out. And on that note, if you guys enjoy it, hit that like button. Make the YouTube gods happy. Question about ozone. What do you think about connecting it to your calcium reactor? I have a third chamber which I can use for gas exchange. Any issues you can think of? That's a good question. I've never considered that one. You would have to use a vacuum pump or something to push it into the tank if you're not using your skimmer to suck it through. So you would need a vacuum pump or some kind of a pump to push that air/ozone through your thing. You could do it. The only consideration, make sure that chamber is made of ozone-safe acrylic, because if it's not, it's going to crack and break down over time. James Green, thanks for this event. You are most welcome. Anthony, I have a newly cycled tank waiting on my lid from topless to show up. I'm dosing a small amount of ammonium chloride to keep the bacteria alive. Can I add pods or should I wait? You can add pods now. If your tank is cycled, you're dosing a bit of ammonia, keeping the tank cycled. You're basically just feeding the bacteria for when you add the fish load. Now, the pods do need something to eat in the tank if you're going to add them. If you have your lights on, you probably have some like bacteria, that little surface film building up, which they can eat and they'll probably be happy. If your lights are off, I'd probably dose a bit of Phyto or something just to make sure they have some food source as the tank's getting ready to be mature itself. Have to go feed the family. Much love. Good to see you, Richard, buddy. Martin, I'm from remote BC. No local store is where I am. Where do you recommend getting corals online? How remote in BC? Whereabouts, Martin? If you are on the West Coast, I have Adam on from Frag Garage a fair amount, and he's pretty awesome. He ships corals. Definitely gotten stuff from him. There's another one. If you're on the other coast, there is Frag Box, March, who also sells online. So they're two good sources that ship. Tidal Gardens. The scheduling of Mackinac worries me. Peak hurricane season. Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you the story in a few minutes. Okay, actually, I'm going to tell you now. So, if you're going to Disney in its hurricane season, that is by far the best time to go to Disney. We went to Mackinac 2019, I think it was, the year before the pandemic and all the craziness of the world. And we were there, and there was a hurricane. It didn't actually hit. It was just a bit stormy. But, so we ended up staying there because flights are canceled. So we stayed at Mackinac for an extra week or so at the hotel. And then we ended up going to Disney every day, and Disney was dead. I was like, hurricane's the best time to go to Disney. So anyways, if you want Disney time, that's a pro tip. As long as the hurricane doesn't come, you're safe. Starting a new tank. Any tips for curing the rock to remove silicates and PO4? If it is dry rock, you're probably safe. If it has a bunch of PO4 in it, I mean, you could run GFO on a reactor to kind of suck it out of the rock. It's not something I've ever worried about, unless you pulled out of a tank that had a bunch of dead stuff and nasty stuff on it. Then you might have some PO4 in it, but generally I'll just put it in a tank with a heater and some flow, and then dose some bacteria. Give it a food source, like a little bit of fish food or something, or ammonium, and just let that kind of feed it and build up the bacteria culture. What do you use gamer tag? I've dosed the hydrogen peroxide trick a few times. Removed the rock with a toothbrush with H2O2, and algae is reset. It works. Yeah, it does work really well. What's going on, just friends? Barry, I'm liking just having kelp to keep up with my daily consumption. Almost 2 gallons a day evaporation. Calcium 449, 8.75 elk. Yeah, if you can just run kelp, it is a really cool solution. If I could, I probably would on my big tank. Like, it can't keep up, so I do a lot of stuff on top of it. But if it's one thing, the dose is really cool. Like, even the Alpha Reef, I started dosing on the Gani Nano, and just one thing on the doser is just so simple. It's nice. Prince George, Centerville, BC. Yeah, I mean, you have an airport there, so you can get stuff overnighted. That's what I would look at. Bug Adam at Frag Garage or March at Frag Box. They're both really good. They both ship. They're both overnight corals too. Brian, candy corals and Toronto also suggest. Yeah, candy corals has some nice stuff. Reefer Joe, Vermidids are winning, the skinny kind. Added about 20 bumblebees, dosing reef snow, nothing working. Wrasses, any other ideas? I actually started to film some stuff because I had a bunch of vermids on my tank. I haven't done the reef coral or the... Can't find it. But I bought the calcium carbonate powder to do my own DIY version. And I added about 20 bumblebees to mine as well. And they are definitely, cruising all the rock, and I can see them going after stuff. So I think they will win. It just takes time. Same thing with the calcium carbonate powder. Dosing that at night, preferably when they're feeding, they'll bring it in, and it will just keep on doing that, and it will eventually kind of tone them down over time. Hurricanes are a walk in the park till your house floods. Yeah, that's no good. Hello from Quebec. What's your goal product on your list for 2024? I don't know yet, to be honest. There's nothing I really need for the tanks. I have seen some cool things that were like frozen fish feeders and automated ones and stuff like that was kind of cool. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Overall, as long as the tanks are happy and going. Anthony, thank you for the super chat, buddy. Much appreciated. I don't know. I'll go back to you on the goals. I haven't decided if there's any product goals. Overall, I'm pretty happy where my tanks are right now, but just Ren, I replaced the Sea Chase Silent 3.0 with AI Access 90. This seems to have a lot less flow than the Sice, even though it's more gallons per hour. Any ideas why? Make sure you calibrate it. Make sure you update the firmware on it. I don't know what the Sea Chase one is, but I do have one of the Access is on mine. I think I have the 40 on my nano tank, but it's only running about 50%. It's tons on there. Work-life balance for all, exactly. John Wright, are you looking forward to some corals from Fiji's now opened up again? If I find really cool stuff, I'm always on the prowl. The hardest part is running low on space and where to put them all. Anthony, thanks again, buddy. Appreciate the super chat. I don't know. The only thing that I'm currently really hunting for now is more Ghanies. I have probably about 12 or so in my Ghani nano, and I'm on the hunt for more cool ones. There's tons and tons in there. David Thompson, do you think a Nuvo tank at 21 inches tall is too shallow for a reef tank? Would you recommend a taller tank like 24 or 26? Thanks for all the great content as always. You're most welcome. Thank you. 21's a cool height. I mean, this tank, you can't see it, but the one beside me it's only 14 inches tall. It's a pretty shallow tank. I think the water box is 24. So 21, I think it's a good height. If you are doing a lower tank, though, you got to consider that in your aquascape, especially once you get into corals later. In my early days of reefing, I made my aquascape far too high on the tank, which looked awesome when the tank was new. But as stuff grew in, it didn't leave a lot of coral space. So just make sure you keep, your aquascape, try and shoot for the bottom third, maximum halfway up the tank, and make sure you leave that coral space because you'll appreciate it down the road. Josh Allen, I've been dosing Captivate Kelp and I find it takes over a day or two to become clear. Can I dose it before it goes clear? Yes, you can. They call it, if you're dosing kelp that's not clear, they call it, like milk or, kelp powder or saturated kelp, a bunch of different names. I dose stuff that isn't fully clear in mine. I added little fins and zip ties and stuff to mine to purposely make it slightly more potent. Now the consideration is when you dose that to your tank, it's going to have to dissolve in your tank. So you want to dose somewhere that's a high flow area. So ideally, if you have a little power head or something where it doses, it will be a lot better. Now, kelp isn't the purest thing in the world, and you might get some, unwanted stuff in there that can build up over time. If you never do a water change, I think eventually it might bite you in the butt. If you do water change once in a while, then I think you're fine. Personal thoughts on that one. Difference between microalgae reactor versus refugium. All comes down to space. It's still algae either way. You're growing it in, like a shader reactor. You can grow it in a turf scrubber. You can grow it in a refugium. They're all going to suck up nutrients. They're all going to work. Something like a turf scrubber is more efficient for its size because it's growing hair algae, which is a simpler algae that grows faster. So you can grow it in a smaller area, and because that faster growth, it's going to pull a lot more. A refugium is less work. You just have a big chamber in your sump, throw some Chaeto or Callirpa, whatever you want in there. It grows, you know, it's pretty low to maintenance. You slap a light on it, life's good. You could do something like, if you don't have space, in the past I've used Chaeto reactors, which is basically a reactor with a light around it, some Chaeto inside. They're more of a pain to clean, a little more maintenance, but again, if you don't have the sump space, that's another option. So they all work. They're just, you know, different methods to accomplish similar things. Any recommendations on tank suppliers in Western Canada? Thinking of ordering from Waterbox Direct. So Waterbox does sell directly in Canada now, which is nice. They will do custom ones, or you can get their pre-made ones. If you want a custom tank, I've had a few tanks built from Concept Aquariums, including the one beside me. They built 3 or 4 tanks for me. They're based out of Calgary, and then you can truck it. For the price, they're pretty good, but you don't get... Usually with them, I'll do a steel stand, but then you got to finish your stand or face it yourself, however you want to do that. Where if you go with like Waterbox, for instance, you get more of the polished package with like all the cabinetry and all that stuff. So that's kind of one of the bigger considerations between the two. John Wright, have you always been able to keep Gonnies, or have you failed in certain tanks? They have done very well in my water box, and I've done nothing special that I'm aware of in my water box, and they've thrived in there. I have had some in the past in other tanks where they didn't necessarily thrive as much. Like in this tank, for instance, I did have a couple little chunks of them that I think they kind of faded on me. You know, the nano tank, they all seem to be thriving in there. Everything seems very happy. The only one that wasn't happy was one that fell in the sand and got buried in there. So they've all been doing well. So I have had tanks back in the day where they didn't seem as happy, but I'm going to say the last year or two, they've all seemed to thrive. A big thing is too, Gonnies love manganese, so make sure you're dosing some form of a trace element that includes manganese. And I also think that dosing, you know, a little particulate foods once in a while and feed them also goes a long way. Perfect. Hour from Calgary. Yeah. Talk to Dave at Concept Aquariums. Tell him Devin from ReefDudes sent you. Yeah, he's made at least 3 or 4 tanks for me over the years, so he's a good guy. Just be very specific on what you want. That's the biggest thing. Like, you know, I want these, you know, seams in black, tape the seams. Just be very specific on what you want. And as long as you do that, you'll be good. Barry, most of Florida is built to withstand a hurricane now. Florida has been through a lot of them. Yeah, no kidding. Not scared anymore. Yeah, it is storm season for some of you guys. So, you know, make sure you guys got your backups. Dustin, on my new upgraded 200-gallon tank running a reef mat, 1200, Red Sea 900, should I keep those off for a few days when adding new live rock to my display? Would it still be okay? Since water, algae issues. Yeah, the reef mats, the rollers, yeah, you can keep them on. If you're adding a bunch of sand or stuff to your tank, you're probably going to burn through the rolls at first. I found the first time I ever used them on new tanks, it would be, you'd burn through a roll pretty quick, but then over time they last longer and longer and longer once it gets rid of all those little particulates out of the water. Woody's Gamertag, do you think the fun part of reefing is over once your tank is on cruise control and everything thrives? What is the fun part, the journey or the destination? I definitely favor a bit of the journey. I like building the tanks. I love creating the little ecosystems for me. I think that's a fun part of it. You know, like I love a new build, you know, even like the dart frog vivarium beside me. Like I love the building it of all that stuff and creating little ecosystems. I find that really fun. So, I mean, if it is autopilot, it's a bit of a trade-off. Like when I had a kid and had no time for, you know, a good year plus, I was very happy my tank was more or less on autopilot. But again, I do love new gear. I love tinkering. I love customizing. So it's definitely a mix of the two, but I find the journey fun. I find the building, the setting up, you know, the creating ecosystems, probably the most fun part of it all. And that's, you know, part of the reasons I like mix up and change stuff once in a while is just because it keeps it more fresh for me. You know, if it's too easy, you kind of run out of stuff to do. You know, especially with me doing YouTube, that doesn't help either, because I'm like, okay, what can I do something for, you know, some new project to do a video on? You know, sometimes I'm just like, oh, my tank would probably be happier if I messed with it less. But I'm like, yeah, I'm going to try this out, or I'm going to experiment with this. Or like, oh, I've never tried this system. Let me try this. So the tanks like stability. Mixing it up all the time is not stability, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Have you considered trying the moonshiners? I have tried the moonshiners actually, and it does work pretty well. It keeps you, so here's the trade-off. It keeps you more aware of your tank. You, especially if you dose it daily, every day you're looking at your tank, every day you're doing your little tweaks. And some of these trace elements get eaten up very quickly. They get used up really quickly in the water. So dosing them daily keeps it more available to the corals, which I found them to be happier, more vibrant. They did seem to be happier when I was doing it every single day. I've been slacking on that for quite a while now. I put more trace elements on dosers now, and then I'm more using the moonshiners to tweak it rather than doing it daily. So we'll see. I picked up the Tropic Marin A and K a couple weeks ago, and I just put that on dosers on the tank, and I think I just guessed it around, I think I did 8 mils a day. And I'm going to let that run for about a month, then I'm going to do an ISP test and see where it's at, and then I'll use the moonshiners to tweak it off of that. So new approach is use, kind of a bulk trace element, soup on a doser as my dailies, and then just do the tweaking with the shine after that. What on Reefer? I love the build. Aside from that, almost finished the build on my new system, but already planning the next. Yeah, the build is addicting. It really is. Did you see any improvement? Yeah, when my tank was very stable and I actually dosed it every single day as you're supposed to, the tank did seem very happy. And I think just you being more connected to the tank is a big chunk of it. Currently on Alpha Reef. Yeah, so I did that for fun. I'm using Alpha Reef on the Nano beside me. And I also put some, not that I need more dosing, but I also put some on, I think I put 20 mils a day onto the water box as well. And I lowered my calcium reactor effluent to 3 or 4 mils a minute, just to kind of till that balances out. Just started Alpha Reef. What are your thoughts on it? I'm still new to it as well. I've been using it less than a month. I love the simplicity. I love the fact that it has trace elements and everything all in one, which I think is really cool. I want to shout out Patrick, the owner of Polyp Lab, for being super nice. Isn't Phil the owner? I don't know what Phil is. Phil's the one I know from Polyp Lab. I don't think I know Patrick. Either way, hello Phil / Patrick. Martin, have a question about tweaking my reef mat 1200. Seems that the higher up it is off the sump, the more head pressure, correct, you would have going through the rolls would last longer. Does anyone have any? I don't have any insight. You are correct. Higher up it is, the more water pressure, the more life and usefulness you'll get out of your rolls. I've not used the reef mat, but I have the Clarity 5000 on my tank. And same thing, I have that one elevated up higher as well, just to keep that extra water pressure coming down the roll. I do find it makes it more efficient. So the Red Sea, same thing, I guess, that one's kind of freestanding, I believe. So you could probably just put a little stand of something underneath and it would help that. You just gotta find that happy level where it's not too out of the water that it makes it noisy, and just find that sweet spot. But yeah, it definitely makes it more efficient. Would it still be okay to reuse water out of the 2 tanks since I have an algae outbreak in one, or keep the bigger cycle short? If you have a big algae outbreak, you could potentially be introducing those algae spores into your new tank. So I would be more hesitant if I had a pest or something I didn't want in the new tank. So that's the tricky bit. If you want to be super hardcore, I suppose you could run it through like a sediment filter or something and go into your tank and probably filter that out. Like if you took like a single canister RO filter and just put a sediment filter and pump water through there, that would probably filter out a lot of the nasties if you put it through like a 1 or 5 micron filter. Yeah, I don't know if I do that. I might use the block in the sump with no light, but yeah, I don't know. I'm on the fence on if I use water from that one, because you don't want to introduce a new headache in your brand new tank. Rather than reuse water, maybe you could grab Rebel and put in the sump. Yeah, see, I agree. I'd be more inclined to use media from that tank that's in the dark, rather than using the water that likely has algae spores and stuff flowing through it. But again, it will speed up your cycle. It's a trade-off. But you don't want the nasties in there. Now again, stuff in your tank. If you don't have a pinkish nourishment, those guys work wonders. I used to have a bunch of algae in the tank beside me, and I put 2 of them in there, and it's gone. There's 0 algae in that tank now, after like a month. Like, those guys are awesome algae eaters, and would 100% recommend the one if you're trying to battle some form of an algae. Devin just said what I wrote. Impeccable timing, Witty. Alright, if I missed any questions, just ask them again. I apologize because it all gets lost during the spiels. All right, guys. So, what else do you want to know? What else do you want to dig into for reefing rabbit holes today? It's pretty good. 40 minutes straight ranting so far. I lent a local guy a par meter, and he gave me a bunch of different craft beers to try as a thank you, which is pretty awesome. So lots of more live stream fun for the next bit. As for new projects, what else I do? I just put an XR15 on the sump on my tank beside me, and I'm going to remove a bunch of coral and stuff out of it, make a little frag section in the sump. I'm going to pull some rock out of this tank and like thin it out and make it more like Balmy Islandish. So that's kind of my next little mini project. Dustin, spent about 2 months on this 200-gallon build, want to do it right. Absolutely, you are most welcome. Thoughts on PO4 ranges for coloration? Historically, I've always shot for 0.03 to 0.09 range. When I had Lou from Tropic Marin on a week or two ago, he was kind of saying, you know, like more up to 0.15 type of thing. So, you know, less than 2 is good. I wouldn't want it above 2, but if it's around 0.1 or a bit higher, I wouldn't really worry too much about it. I think mine was closer to 0.13 to 1.15, something like that. And, you know, everything looks good and is happy. You know, there's a certain point where if your phosphates are too high, it can inhibit calcification and, you know, stuff might not be as colorful and yada, 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 certain things. But yeah, as long as it's in a reasonable range, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I find when you have a bit more phosphate, you get kind of deeper, richer colors out of your coral. If they're too low, then you get more of that like zeolite, more pastel-y look. But again, I find it more like the corals are on the brinks, on the edge. So I personally want a little higher just for those more deeper, richer colors. Ryan, auto water change running using reef crystals versus dosing. Worth it for new tanks for the first year? I think water changes are more important on a new tank than a mature tank. So when your tank's new, it's more likely going to have swings and instabilities, where water changes are a bit of a reset in a sense. You're going to, if you have pollutants building up, you have some other funky stuff, you're going to dilute it. If you're deficient on trace elements or something, you're kind of replenishing it. Now, it's not fully doing it, but it's kind of like a safety buffer. And I find as your tank gets older and more mature, then it doesn't necessarily need to rely on water changes as much. They're more for like good measure, you know, preventative long term. So yeah, for the first year, I definitely think it is good to keep up on your water changes. Jacob Mills, give me an idea for a 20-gallon cube. I want to redo it, not sure on the theme or corals. If you want a super easy tank, I'm always a fan of doing a bunch of cool rock flowers because they're super easy, they're super colorful. You know, my 15-ish gallon, whatever it is, Hello Reef tank, 14, 15, I just loaded that up with Gawnies, which I think is super cool to do like a Gawny themed tank because I love Gawnies. I've never done it. So super cool. So it depends on if you want what kind of level of tank you want. If you do something like Zoas or rock flowers, dosing's minimal, you don't really have to worry about much, makes it super duper easy. If you want to up it a little bit, something slightly more complicated, I think Gawnies is pretty awesome. And then, you know, so far the first month or two I only did water changes on it, and now I'm slacking on the water changes a bit because now I'm dosing all for reef, so it's just, you know, one doser and dosing all my stuff. Yeah, Fish Ventura, thank you for the 49 super chat, much appreciated. What is gamer tag? Lou says 0.1 to 0.15 now. I don't have enough experience to really weigh in myself, but the target always seems to be rising from 0 to 0.05 days. I've always struggled to keep it super low, so mine's always been a bit higher, and my corals all, you know, for the most part been happy, so I think that's been great. Ryan Washington, these Q&As save me a lot of time and research. Thank you for the answers. You're most welcome, and thank you for the super chat. Much appreciated. What is gamer tag? A clown harem sounds interesting for a 20. Clowns could be cool too. Again, you're going to feed more and have to rely on more water changes and export if you do too many clowns or like a harem. But aside from that, yeah, definitely pretty cool. John Wright, woke up yesterday to see a hermit eating my conch. Oh, yikes. Put him in the sump later today. Oh, yeah, that's no fun. Dun dun dun. No fun at all. I find conches to be awesome cleaners. I've kind of toned down the hermit crabs I use these days. Blue legs I find are a bit of a jerk. I find the red and like the scarlet and the orange ones, I find they're more peaceful and less punks in the tank, because I kind of shoot for more of those type these days. But yeah, conch snails, I think they're like wicked cleaners, especially when you're going through the diatoms and all those stages. The little trunk comes out and they just clean the sand bed. And, like, I have one in the tank beside me. He's always just cruising around cleaning things. So definitely a fan of them. Would also be cool for a 20. Yeah, if I wanted like a very low-key tank, I've never done it, but I always say that one day I want to do like a Xenia tank, because I love the pulsing motion, but again, I don't want to put it in my reef tank and risk it spreading everywhere. But in just like a super little desk nano might be a cool one to try. I feel like you could get away with minimal water changes and have a pretty easy tank. Maybe I'll put a little mini one in my future work office when we move to the new office. Have you ever used ChemiClean for cyano? I sure have. Fighting cyano in the main tank myself. Keep talking myself out of using ChemiClean. I'm a little worried about my clams. I have used it with clams. I did not have an issue with it. Now, it is somewhat of an antibiotic, so I think you're going to have it potentially can impact your tank a bit in, you know, lessening the good bacteria load. Now, the only consideration, that's like the main consideration. Every time I've used it, I have not had any issues. You know, a couple days later, the tank looks amazing again. So I have not had any bad experiences with it. That being said, yes, you can affect the bacterial in your tank a little bit. Now, the other thing is too, whenever I use it, I always take off the skimmer cup and just let the skimmer overflow because it's providing all that aeration. I also tend to run it a day longer than it recommends. And then I tend to just use the skimmer to like skim it out as a bit of a water change. And I find that works really well. But I usually find I got to leave it a bit longer than it says. I've not experienced any downfalls to clams when I did it. And overall, I'd say the tank looked great, you know, looks super clean and pristine afterwards. So I'm not afraid of using it if it's really bad. Again, if I have little bits here and there, I'm not going to do it. But if it's like overrunning the tank, you know, I would suck it out with a water change and then dose it after that. Then, Xenia is great. Love my Xenias. Yeah, I don't know. I love the pulsing motion. So I don't know. One day I'll find an excuse. Maybe it will be like an office. I saw this one tank years ago. And it was same thing. The guy, he didn't have a light on it. I think he had a power head on and a heater, and that was it. It was just a tank by the window with some funky rock just covered in Xenia pulsing. Just like sunlit. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So one day maybe, if I do a office tank, maybe I'll do something like that, which is super easy. Don't even have to worry about dosing. We'll see. When I use my doser, I always have a buildup on the tubes. Is there a trick to avoid the buildup? Is your tubes in the water? Generally, if you keep them above the water, if they're in the water, usually it can kind of like seep up into the tube and that can build up. If they're above the water, I find usually it doesn't seem to be an issue. It also depends what you're dosing. Again, it might just be a bit of maintenance things where you rinse them out once in a while. Who is going to reef stock? You know, if it was closer, I would one day. One iron briefer, I've used red slime remover and worked great. Yeah, they're basically the same thing, or pretty similar. Cheers, Devin. 20% water change puts me at 2,000 liter system at the moment. Yeah, you don't have to do it. Like when I should really get my auto water change going, but when I was doing it, I was doing about 1.5 gallons a day. So whatever that is over the month, and then on 200 gallons. And that seemed to be pretty good. Like, it's just enough to kind of keep things ticking along. I mean, if you don't have one, then, you know, every few months, that could be a good idea. Are you on the way to open a store? Probably not. I've thought about selling 3D printed stuff online. But then at the same time, I'm like, do I want to be printing stuff 24/7? But then people keep asking for, like, my light shades and different things. So, I don't know. We'll see. On Black Friday, I bought a new 3D printer that's about 3-4 times the fast speed of my old one. So I don't know, maybe I will. I can actually make stuff quicker, but it's cool for prototyping stuff. Any appropriate reefers? Mangrove Xenia tank is awesome. Mangroves and Xenias could be kind of cool too. Mangrove tank would be fun. Jacob, mangroves with rock flowers on the bottom. That's my vote. Cut a 45-degree angle on the end of the tube. That's a good call too. Cut a 45 so it doesn't necessarily sit around the rim. It kind of drips off the bottom tip. That could absolutely work. I'm gonna have to check that one out. I haven't checked out that tank in a while. All right, guys, what else you got? What other kind of questions? What burning reefing questions do we have? If it was a lagoon tank, mangroves and rock flowers would be awesome. How does one make money with a store? Many seem to be closing. I think you have to do online sales to have a store these days, unless you live in a big city with a ton of foot traffic. But I'm pretty much convinced that it's essential to be online / in person if you're going to do it. Woody, do you think you'll ever have a wave maker on the far side of your tank? Nope. Most peninsula owners give in and put one there. If I had a light bar that went to the edge of the tank and I could run the wire along the top of the lights and sneak it just under it, I might do it. But with my floating light bar, nope, I refuse. I will add more gyres to the side. I will add more whatever. I'll do whatever it takes not to do it. I've had this crazy idea for a while about putting like an MP40 or MP60 on the bottom of the peninsula tank. One day I'm actually going to try this, but I've had the idea. If you take one of the pumps and you put it at the bottom of the tank, so like on your sandbed, and you put the dry side underneath your tank, and then you do like so you don't want to suck in sand, so you need like a cone or something on it like this, you might be a cool way to get flow at the far end of the tank without drilling holes or having anything visible. So I've been thinking about this for ages. One day, maybe I'll 3D paint like a fake rock with a tunnel or something and try it, but the only like sketchy bit is you need to have some way to make sure the dry side doesn't fall off through all that thickness, so you need a bracket or some kind of a mount. But I think that would be cool. I've been thinking about this for ages. One day I'll make it happen. Give me a few minutes. Okay. But I think that would be a really cool way to do it. Again, if I ever did a longer tank, I'd probably consider doing closed loops on the far end, but I still refuse to put any pumps on the far end. It just takes away from that like pristine floatiness. Yeah, okay, so Lee, when you're doing chemi clean, I would turn off the auto water change when you're doing it. You run an external skimmer. Yeah, okay, that's tricky. You can add an air pump or something. The biggest consideration is the chemi clean is going to absorb the oxygen out of the water, so you need to make sure you're upping the oxygen in the water. If your skimmer has like a little overflow thing, like a drain, you could just drain it back into the tank. Just make sure your skimmer doesn't overflow. Fish Ventura, your large ice cap stir, after cleaning, what size is your first dose? In what interval do you find to redose? Per what quantity? When I was doing it, okay, I would just dose, I basically dose what my evaporation is on my big tank, because I'm still dosing more than that. If I didn't have as high a demand, I would just dose whatever it was to keep my numbers stable. Even after cleaning it, you will have a bit of higher elk afterwards when you put in your fresh kelk versus it's slowly teetering off, but it was never that big enough to worry about. Jacob, I have a bunch of rock flowers in my 20-gallon. I like the idea of zinnia, GSP wall, mangroves. Keep the rock flower nems at the bottom. I think it'd be awesome, right? And if you do like zinnia, GSP, mangroves, rock flowers, you don't even really have to worry about dosing. Like, you could do periodic water changes and the tanks can be happy. Like, they're all stuff that likes, dirtier water, or they're not as picky is probably a better way of saying it. It just makes such an easy tank, especially when you already have other tanks and you don't want to up your workload too much. I think it'd be a cool way to do it. I've been having this thought because I don't know for like the real job that we're moving to a new office. I'll have my own office. Like, should I do a reef tank in there? And then I'm like, but I'm only there a couple days. Do I want to make more work? So a super easy one, good potential. I like it. I admire the refusal. I have a 4x3 tank that identifies as a peninsula. We all have water movement on the back wall to keep it attractive. 100%. I think I just wouldn't do it. I'll find a way to make flow, make it happy. But even the other consideration is too, like put corals at the end of the tank that don't require as much flow, right? Like put LPS and stuff over there that doesn't need it, and keep your acros and all your stuff, more to the 2/3 closer to the flow. So coral placement can be another way to get around it too. Even though I do snuck a couple acros down there, they seem happy and, should work. But coral placement's really a big thing too. Have you ever had Jabo or Coralbox Waymakers? MPs are expensive. Yes, I have. Okay. So with Jabo, I find the return pumps were pretty good, actually. I don't think I ever had an issue with the Jabo return pump. The Wavemakers are a bit hit or miss. At first, for the price, it's kind of hard to beat. for the price. The coral box, I guess the closest one to the Nero, the hockey puck one, I had that for a while and it was great flow for what it was, but the impeller got like squeaky and noisy after a while, which was annoying. So I ended up replacing the impeller and just gave it to a buddy. With the Jabo pumps, I mean, again, the wave makers, longevity is hit or miss on them. You know, so if you have the outlook of if it dies, I'll buy a new one. I mean, that's, you know, have a spare kicking around. Personally, over the years, I've went more to stuff like the Neros and the MPs because it's like a quality of life thing over time, right? I just want a pump that's not going to die on me and be reliable. And another big thing is too, having multiple wet sides. Like if I got to clean it, I go shoop, shoop, pop on my spare wet side, and then my tank's down for like 30 seconds without flow, and then I can go let it soak, you know, soak in some citric acid, you know, give it a scrub an hour later and just pop it on the, you know, bottom of the desk to hang out till a couple months later until I do it again. The other big thing is for me too, once you've been in it for a while, like having stuff like battery backups. You know, I'm slightly obsessed with these. I just picked up a new one recently, but I just bought another one of these off Amazon the other day when it was on sale, and I'm gonna make another battery backup. But just the fact that I can plug it into the controller and it auto kicks over for battery backup is huge because it saves the tank, right? If something happens, really easy battery backup, no extra gear, a battery, and, you know, a little plug, and then I have my tank protected with flow. So yes, they're more expensive, but I also think that there's a lot of advantages to it. I mean, if it's your first tank, you don't have to do it, right? But as you're in the hobby longer, you appreciate those little things. You appreciate, you know, the longevity, the quality, the extra little features. But if you're just starting out, just, you know, buy a cheap one for now, and, you know, if it dies or you have issues down the road, upgrade later. You don't have to buy, you know, all the fancy stuff right off the bat. Martin, should I invest in ozone from day one, even if I can't tell till I get a controller down the road? Or have a short burst. How big is your tank, Martin? Tank size is a big kind of thing on ozone. So first question, how big's your tank? Fish Ventura, no, I mean, how much kalkwasser do you add back to the stir, not H2O2? Okay. So I have the bigger Avast one on my water box now, and I add about 1.5 cups to it when I refill it. And, you know, every like 7 to 10 days, I'll add like 1/4 to 1/2 cup just to like replenish it. When I was using, I don't fully remember what I was using when I had the ice cap one. If I had too much powder in the ice cap one, it would spin out the magnet, and that'd be annoying, so I have to use a little stick and get it back centered. So I had a certain amount. I probably said in one of my videos of what like the sweet spot was, but I found the sweet spot where it wouldn't spin out, it wasn't too thick to overload the magnet. But yeah, I can tell you the ice cap one, or not the ice cap, the Avast, larger Avast, I use about 1.5 cups. And then somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 cup every like seven, you know, week, 1 to 2, week and a half, 2 weeks to like kind of replenish it. Do you have a video of your battery backup builds? I do. I have 3 or 4. Just Google ReefDudes battery backup. You'll find a bunch. Martin, 150 gallon system. Okay, so 150 gallons, you're at least a 4-foot tank. So the bigger the tank, the more you're going to notice the ozone. If it's a brand new tank, I probably wouldn't worry about it. Long term, I think it's good because I like the fact that it's like you get benefits similar to carbon without having to buy carbon all the time. So it's basically like, you know, you're buy it once carbon in a sense. So carbon absorbs stuff. It's going to absorb the organics in the water. Yeah, 5 foot. Okay, yeah, it's probably worth it for you then. Again, don't worry about it right away, but eventually I think it'd be good for you. 5 foot water box. Yeah, so mine's 6 foot water box, and it's a huge difference. So if carbon's going to absorb organics, it's going to absorb funky smells and stuff in your water, where ozone will break down the organics that cause the yellowing, that cause the funky smells. So it's basically like having your ongoing perpetual carbon in a sense. David, Higer wave makers are good. Nero is a decent alternative as well. I do really like the Neros as well for their size and how tiny they are. Like, I prefer the MPs because I love no wires in the tank, but if I have a wire, the Nero's kind of the one just because they're so tiny and they're so controllable. And you can put it down to like barely anything to tons of flow. Higers, again, like the Higer, if you want a cheap power head, you know, the Higer, whatever it is, I've used those as well. You know, they they work well. They're cheap, you know, they're AC, but they're bigger, so they're a lot more bulky in the tank. So if you want cheap, definitely does the job. That was my problem with the Ice Cap 2, the Vast. I have this follow one. Yeah, so the Ice Cap, two things. I found the original magnet couldn't handle as much powder, so I put a slightly bigger magnet in it, and I basically measured with a caliper the distance of the magnets that are in the stir, and then I bought a bigger one to match it. The other thing, if you have the Ice Cap 1, over time, the magnets did start to wear through the acrylic, so I put a little circle of glass in the bottom to kind of prevent that. That was the other thing I did with that one. I'll tell the wife you said is mandatory. Yeah, the clarity's nice. The biggest thing too, like with my wife, if I had, you know, any funky like oceany smells from the tank, she would complain. And so I'd be like, oh, time to change the carbon. And now I haven't heard any complaints in like years. It's because I've been running ozone. So you can run ozone and a calcium reactor, completely separate systems. They're fine. I've always used my skimmer as my ozone reactor. So the only thing is you got to make sure whatever skimmer you have is ozone safe. So there's two types of acrylic. There's cast and extruded. One of them's fine, ozone safe, and one is not fond of ozone and will break down quicker. It's not that you can't use it, but it's just that your skimmer will become more brittle and crack or might yellow over time. And that's kind of the risk, right? So just make sure your skimmer is ready for ozone, and then you should be fine for the long haul. But yeah, so on like my nano tank, it's, you know, 14-inch cube. I'm not gonna put ozone on it. You know, even a 2-foot tank is kind of like but when you're getting like a 4, 5, 6-foot tank, then I think you'll really notice the benefits. All right, guys, hopefully we answered it all today. But yeah, it's kind of a fun one today. I think I'm gonna wrap her up pretty quick here. The wife's asked me to help her out with a few things, but Jacob Mills, Anthony, Fish Ventura, Ryan Washington, thank you guys for the super chat. I do greatly appreciate it. Always appreciated. And again, if you guys enjoyed this, you found it useful, you know, hit the like button. Helps the YouTube algorithms and helps other people find the channel. So appreciate it. All right, guys, gonna wrap her up. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with me today and talking fishy reef chat. I think I'm just gonna do just answer the random questions, you know, maybe once a month or so. But it's kind of fun to do. John Wright, thanks again, Evan. Thank you for your streams. Thanks for hanging out in the late nights or the early mornings, depending on where you are in the world. All right, guys, happy Wednesday, and I will catch you guys on next week's stream.